Hello everyone, and welcome to the third ever C-Suite Leadership Mixer. For those who are tuned in and don't know me, my name is Dean Carroll, and I'm one of the co-founders of C-Suite, which is a new startup aiming to provide a lifetime learning platform for executives. Our Mixer series of virtual events will be a taster for our MVP, which will launch next month, so not long to wait now. In the meantime, you can get lots more information on our website, which is csuite.sg, and C-Suite has a hyphen, by the way. If you like what you see there, please do follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to get updates about what we have coming up. So, back to the matter in hand, enough of the spruik. Today, it's our pleasure to host Angela Mackay as our Mixer guest. Angela is the Asia-Pacific Managing Director at the Financial Times and has led the organization here in the region for more than 12 years. Founded in 1888,
I wasn't there then.
The Pinken, as the FT is known, was founded in 1888 and is one of the few major success stories in the modern media landscape. While many competitors in the news business have withered on the vine due to the collapse of print advertising revenues across the globe, the FT has actually continued to flourish. This is mainly due to its loyal subscriber base and a digital pivot, which was quite revolutionary at the time. So it is known colloquially as the Pinken, as I said, and the company was acquired from Pearson, a UK company, by the Japanese holding company Nikkei in 2015. Now, back to Angela. She is a journalist turned commercial supremo and has been with the FT for 18 years. I think that's right. Excellent. The research worked. Prior to that, she held senior roles at the Economist, CNBC, the Times of London, and the Australian Financial Review, all amazing brands. Angela has worked in Hong Kong, Sydney, and London. She has a law degree from the University of New South Wales and is a strong proponent of female leadership. She is also co-chair of the Hong Kong International Literary Festival. So before we start and get into it, just a quick note to say that you can submit your questions to Angela via the Q&A icon. You can see at the bottom of your screen there. We will try to answer as many of your questions as we can today. Feel free to remain anonymous if you wish, or do leave your name and company there too, if you'd like it to be name checked. In addition to that, you can obviously comment and talk to each other in the chat box, but we would just ask that you remain respectful and professional when doing so. Thank you. So now welcome, Angela, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Well, here as opposed to there, wherever we are. Yeah.
Somewhere in the ether, the virtual ether. So yes, thanks for joining us, and let's get straight into it with a kind of scene setter on the modern media landscape, if we may. So the FT went against the grain and introduced a paywall pretty much from the outset when the internet arrived. And as a result, subscribers still saw the value of paying for FT content digitally, despite much of the internet being free. So how much of that success was down to the FT's brand equity, and how much of it was just about the strategy and execution in terms of a robust digital offering?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we had a very, very bright guy that worked for us, a guy called Yen Cheng. He was a Taiwanese American, and he was a journalist, but was irresistibly attracted toward technology. And he's a bit of a boffin. He had a master's degree from Cambridge in English literature and a degree in computer science from MIT. So he's like odiously clever and competent. But Yen came up, and he was in Hong Kong when he did it. He came up with the metered model, which is whereby we gave people a certain number of free views of stories before they came up against a hard wall, a paywall. And the lovely thing about that was it was a dynamic prospect. So if you were having a pretty if you wanted a lot of traffic on one particular day, you could then push out the paywall to like 9 free stories perhaps in a month, as opposed to 2 or 3 free stories before they hit the paywall. So it was a very interesting model, and I don't mind taking the credit for it, but because he just worked literally only 50 meters away from me, so I'm sure I inspired him somehow. But this model did inspire a lot of other people, a lot of other media groups, because it was promptly adopted by the New York Times, by the Wall Street Journal, by the South China Morning Post, by the Australian Financial Review. It became a lot of established media, media's entreport into a digital subscription model. So we were a little bit surprised that it was such a strong, it set such a strong example, but we were delighted because we figured that everyone else had done a lot of analysis and maybe there's going to be some safety in those numbers. But it was a great start for us, and we've been able to capitalize on that ever since. And that was, I think, about 15 years ago. But we always thought that people should pay for our content. It costs us a hell of a lot of money to produce, 600 journalists. And not to mention all us ants that scramble around them to make sure that we can provide the platforms that gets their journalism out. I think that for titles like the FT, probably the Wall Street Journal, and maybe the Economist and others, people are happy to pay for it because they can use it as a business tool. It's not just something for them as a nice to have at home. It's also something that they can use as a business tool that helps them make decisions in their work life. So I think it makes it a little bit more appealing as a subscription product. That said, others like the New York Times and several other titles, maybe the ones I'm not going to mention, have done very, very well at getting people, B2C subscribers, come in there and buy subscriptions. So it's been uneven for everybody, but I think we all kind of started at the same sort of the same sort of model, and that is the metered model. Yeah. And we've all gone in our various directions from there.
Yeah, and you guys are above what, 1 million subscribers now?
Yeah, I think we're 1,100,000 and something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So let's talk about that in terms of the big boys that you kind of name check there. You know, in the era of fake news, free news, paid for truth telling is really now the domain of just a handful of global brands like the FT, like the New York Times, and the South China Morning Post, for example. So those with the credibility and the financial muscle to stay above water. So with that in mind, what sort of future does journalism have as an industry, and what are the societal impacts of the decline of journalism, you know, on a broader scale, when you look at regional journalism, local journalism, even, you know, national journalism and international journalism? It's kind of now the domain of the big guys like you guys, isn't it?
Well, firstly, a bold statement. You know, I think journalism's got a great future, and quality journalism is quality journalism. That remains the same. That remains the North Star, I think, for us and a lot of other titles. The thing that's changing is the delivery methods, right? So when I started in journalism, you read newspapers, watched TV, listened to the radio, the wireless radio. You know, they were the main forms of access. Whereas now the access points are myriad. So you can be, well, like my kids, like myself now, you know, you'll be on 3 different platforms at any one time, consuming news, writing news, sending email, commenting on blogs, uploading pictures to Instagram. So it's the delivery that's changed. And that, I think, is a democratizing impact on journalism. So digital journalism, I think the future is very bright, and we've seen that that demand, not just from our own subscription base, but also players like Vox and Vice in the US, and as I say, about 90% of the FT subscribers are digital now. I suppose most people might be familiar with the Reuters and the Reuters Institute, and they had a report out this year that showed that 3/4 of companies in the publishing industry were confident about their company's prospects. Now, I don't know if that was taken in February or whether it was done in May, depending on where you were in the COVID cycle. But it reflects an optimism amongst a lot of publishers that reader revenue and a lot of diversification strategies are paying off. On the other side, any decline in the quality and value of journalism, I think, would be terrible for society, because unbiased news provides information and serves as a watchdog. It calls out bad behaviour and shines a light on suspect activity. So I'm a true believer, and I really hope that's going to be the case across many societies, although we have seen some erosion in certain places, particularly when you have political issues that try to stamp on the freedom of the press. For us, quality journalism is the mission and the business. It underpins everything we do. So we're a big believer, and will continue to be so. We think we're world class and unique, and we're also profitable. So I would like to think that is our future for many years to come.
Yeah, let's hope so. And we're both big believers in journalism, being both from a journalistic background, but we're probably biased. So with that in mind, why don't we ask the audience what they think? So we'll bring up our first poll question of the night, and the question is: Does a healthy society need truth to power in journalism? Yes, no, or not sure. So everyone get voting. Angela, feel free to vote as well. I know which way you're going to vote in advance.
Yep. I gave it away.
It's all about engagement and immersive activity, right? So yes, so let's give people just a few more seconds. Wow, I've never seen a poll like this before in all the polls.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay, I think let's call it there and display the result on the screen. So for those watching on catch up who won't be having the live experience here and seeing the result on screen, the question was: does a healthy society need truth to power journalism? 100% of people have said yes. So nobody said no, nobody said not sure. So that is great to see. So I'm really pleased to see that. I'm sure you are too, Angela.
Although it would have been good to have a little bit of biffo with somebody disagreeing, and then we could have had some activity. Anyway.
Well, the night is young. The night is young. Hold on to your thought there. Yeah, okay. So let's move forwards then. I wanted to ask you what you thought actually about the new zeitgeist alternative journalism startup Substack, whereby individual journalists can build their own audience and monetize it by charging a subscription fee. It's a company that seems to have got a lot of earned media, got a lot of sizzle publicly, partly because of the investors involved in it, like Andreas and Horowitz, for example. What do you think? Is it a gimmick? Is it a flash in the pan, or is there something of substance there?
Well, I think there's obviously some substance. Substack gives people a platform to publish news and opinion, and I think there's always going to be a market for this. I think something like YouTube has shown that there's a great market for that kind of diverse thought, and some of it's going to be crazy, and other bits of it are going to be, I think, fact-based and reasonable. For example, China has Himalaya, however you want to pronounce it, and that's got a similar business model. I mean, a lot of it's going to be entertainment, and that's not a substitute for reliable journalism, but there's no reason why it can't exist beside good journalism. But more than ever, the issue I have, I think, with sites like Substack and Himalaya is that, you know, you have to be on the lookout for fake news, and or maybe you don't, but, you know, I would like to think people are making some sort of qualitative judgment when they read these or go through and explore these sites. Yeah, I think that the more you get pummeled with lots of different sorts of information, it's a bit harder if you're new to this game to make that kind of assessment. So I suppose it's easy when you read something like the FT or the Economist or whatever. Yeah, it's easy because you probably give them the benefit of the doubt that what you're reading is true, whereas I think it's a little bit harder to do that with Substack and others. The brand power is different, right?
Yeah, the gatekeepers are not there and the filters are not there. Although, you know, the way they're selling it is, this is a home for journalists who've lost their job, and, you know, there aren't many journalism jobs around, so come and do your thing here. But yeah, okay. But while we're on the subject of tech, I wanted to talk about the big tech platforms, right? Like Google and Facebook. They insist they are not media players, yet they publish or at least curate a lot of content. And they have business models based on advertising revenue from viewers of said content. So it seems the only part missing from the makeup of a media company really is that they don't face government regulation in the same way that media owners do, or traditional media owners at least. So would you say that's a fair assessment of things? And do you see these big tech masters of the universe as competitors, collaborators, or something else entirely?
Well, starting at the end and going backwards, you have to engage at all levels, and we have to learn how to coexist with the FANG family. So, you know, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, the FANG. I love the FANG family. I think it's a wonderfully evocative term. But because their fangs are out, right? They do have fangs, and we all know that. That's
without the nets as well.
Yeah.
Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent.
Of course. So we've seen them eat our lunch. We've seen them disintermediate our advertising model. We've seen them do all sorts of things, but at the same time, they have a huge amount of cash, and that's very, very appealing. And I think if you can learn to engage with those big guys, particularly the Googles in our case, and work with them, there can be a symbiotic and useful relationship there. They can fund certain research, or we can work with them on some technology. So that kind of relationship is something that you have to nut out. I think having a 100% combative relationship is not going to be successful for anybody. Now, I do think that they're media companies. I definitely think they're media companies. But I think that often you'll see that legislation, regulation lags real life. So I think this is all still to play for, I think. And perhaps that they'll self-regulate so that this will not become an issue in the future. But at the moment, I think it's all still to play for.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem with the regulators that they're so far behind the curve, right, in terms of where technology is at. You can't, I mean, it seems like decades behind, right? You can't see them catching up until, you know, you've got a big tech CEO decides he wants to be president of America or something like that. And
as opposed to a game show host. Yeah, go on. Oh.
Yeah. As opposed to a reality TV star.
Yeah.
And, you know, becomes kind of poacher turned gamekeeper. But yeah, okay, interesting. So I wanted to ask you, this is kind of coming from me, right? Personal interest on this one. As a former journalist turned commercial head yourself, do you miss the buzz of the editorial desk, or were you glad to move away from the daily grind of news and views and shift closer to the P&L?
Well, who said commercial life wasn't a daily grind? Yeah, it is a daily grind, but you know, I miss the buzz of the newsroom, but I don't particularly miss the work. I write a lot. I'm still in my own industry, so there's a lot of connectivity. I know the editor-in-chief of the FT very well. I know a lot of the senior journalists well. I'm always interested to see who's coming up through the ranks. And the compelling thing about having the job I do now is that I actually have my own P&L to manage, and I'm not spending all my life writing about other people's P&Ls and their business. So I'm kind of practicing what I used to preach about, sort of. So it feels good to help shape the business. And I'd like to think that if I can make reasonable profits, that it's going to go back into the FT and help it improve its longevity, and also ultimately go back into our owners, Nikkei, who I think made a bold move to buy an international media almost 5 years ago to the day. Actually, we're coming up to our 5th anniversary.
Yeah. So a virtuous circle is.
I hope so.
Okay, so let's talk about gender for a second, right? You're a female leader in an industry that is notoriously lacking in gender equality, in a region where businesses are often patriarchal. What are some of the difficulties you faced as a woman along the journey that you think maybe a man wouldn't have had to face? And how did you overcome those?
I can't, hand on heart, say that I have been a victim of any obvious blatant sexism in my career. Now, I'm not talking about when I started my career as a lawyer. That, let me tell you, being a lawyer in the mid 80s, late 80s in Australia, there's a lot of sexism there. But when I got into the media, I felt that there was a more of a level playing field. I like to think that I've been involved, like a lot of women in my profession, that I've been involved in breaking down some barriers for women, particularly in Asia. I hope I've done my part, but I can't actually say. There might be lots of subliminal or hidden problems that I've been a victim of, but I can't actually put my finger on them. But there's been plenty of instances where you go, oh, for Christ's sake, this wouldn't happen to a bloke. But, you know, in business meetings in Korea, for example, you know, I'd enter a room with my staff, and then the Korean, mostly men, and the women that there are usually more junior, they'd be looking around behind me for the male boss, and I'd say, no, it's just me, I'm the boss, which would always be make them go rushing to the phones to completely change the way that they were going to entertain me later that evening. But anyway, it was that's one thing, I suppose, that I've noticed in the past. You know, at the FT, you know, we have a lot of D&I strategies in place to drive female representation at work. We've got a goal that to achieve gender parity across all leadership teams by 2022. At the moment, our board is 42% female, which is good. Our senior management group is 50-50 male-female, which is really good. We do have a gender pay gap in the UK that we need to work on. But, you know, it's all not a Garden of Eden. I mean, even though 42% of our board is women, I'm still the only woman board member at the FT who's ever had a P&L. The other people on the board have unusually been technology, you know, CTOs. We've had 3 female CTOs in a row, so that's unusual in any company. But there's HR, comms, so there is, you know, much more of the traditional female board roles there. So, but I think having a woman with a senior role in technology has been particularly great, because she has got a whole policy and strategy within her own division to make sure that she captures a lot more women in product development. And that, of course, as we all know, is a place where female representation is lagging.
Yes, and is that balance? I know you believe in workplace quotas, and
yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah, and is the balance that the FT has? I mean, I appreciate you're saying candidly that there's room for improvement, but it's pretty good, right? But is that reflected in the holding company as well at Nikkei, given that the company's HQ, it's a Japanese company actually, which Japan traditionally very much a male-dominated business landscape. How does the situation look at Nikkei?
Right. Well, I think Nikkei and the FT share a lot of common values, right? We share a lot of values, or else they wouldn't have bought us, I don't think. But I can't say that we are equal in all those values. So at Nikkei, only about 18% of their workforce is female. They're trying to reach 20% by 2025 and then 30% by 2030, but that's starting from a very low base. And I think one of the problems in Japan, is it a problem, or it's just the way it is, it's just a fact of life so far, is that there's not a lot of turnover in a lot of these well-established Japanese companies. So if you're coming in at a very junior level, it's quite a slog to say, right, well, I've got to really work here for 30 years until I get to this particular level. And actually, when I get to that particular level, there's nobody up there that looks like me, because a lot of people have fallen by the wayside because they've had children and they've decided not to go back. And perhaps, and in the past, there's been certainly 15, 20 years ago, most women didn't go back to work in Japan after they had children. So I think we've got to wait for a whole generation of change. I know that Nikkei is bringing in almost equal numbers of young graduates who are male and female. So that's a great start, but it's going to take almost a generation, I think, to make a big noticeable change. But Nikkei are very supportive of what we do, and I take that to heart, because they don't have to be that supportive, but they are supportive of what the FT does.
Yeah. Okay. So there's hope for the future then. Okay. Right.
I hope there's hope for the future. Unfortunately, I won't be around to see it by that stage.
Me neither. Okay, listen, just a quick shout out to the audience. Get your questions in if you've got any burning issues you want to raise with Angela. Take this opportunity to submit your questions, and we'll come to those. Please take this opportunity, as you don't get a great speaker like this often, and don't get the opportunity.
Far too kind. Thank you.
Yeah. Indeed. Okay, so now to the nature versus nurture argument. And I raise this because I've heard you say in a previous talk, actually, that you kind of became a leader by accident. So I wanted to ask, are good leaders naturally born that way, or do they have to be taught, or is it a mixture of the two, do you think?
I think it's a mixture of nature, nurture, and luck. Plus, you've got to have some talent to start with, right? And you've got to be prepared to put yourself out there in the first place to get noticed. And I think capturing the attention of a sponsor within your company is a really good first step. I didn't have any female sponsors when I was coming through journalism, because, quite frankly, there weren't that many around me in Australia or the UK. But I did have a couple of really wonderful male sponsors who just said, and when I say sponsor, I mean someone that says, oh, look, there's this job going here. Who are the candidates? I think Angela would be good at that. I think Angela's ready to step up and try that. So I think that's a really important leg up for people in their jobs. Mentorship, I think, is also important, but I didn't really get any of that. But I did have sponsors, and I think that's an incredibly helpful thing. And I think having a sponsor and also having peers around you who are critical. And I think in the media business, people are very happy to be critical when the time comes. And I've always had leaders that I've felt that I could look up to and emulate to a certain extent. But you've got to have your own style. I don't think you can just clone yourself on someone else. You need to figure out what you're good at and where you might need improvement, and then develop a style that people around you can trust.
Got it. Okay, well, let's ask the audience what they think on this question. So the next poll question is there such a thing as a natural born leader? So that should be popping up on your screen any second now. So please do get voting. Angela, again, feel free to vote yourself. So people are starting to vote. Result is changing. We'll give you another 10 seconds or so. If you haven't yet voted, please do. Okay, a couple more seconds. There we go. Okay, let's call it. So again, for those watching on catch up, the poll question was, is there such a thing as a natural born leader? 83% of people say yes, which is quite surprising.
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah. 17% say no and 0% say not sure. So that's a really interesting result, actually, isn't it? People think
I'm surprised by that. I mean, and I'd love to meet those people.
Yes.
I could learn a few things from them.
Or hire them, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on. So sorry to dredge up things you've said in the past again, but I've also heard you say before, tongue in cheek, of course, that your job now, because you're so senior, right, is just to sign things. I know you were joking when you said that, but there is some truth in the fact that as people climb the ladder and become more senior, they do lose touch with the practitioners at the grassroots, and indeed the new ways of working that are coming in and the new technologies, just that they're not involved in. So I wonder, as a leader or a manager, how do you think you can prevent that happening? What's your advice to kind of stay attuned with what's happening on a granular level as well as a macro level?
Sure. And yes, it is true. I do sign things. I do sign a lot of things some days. So thank God for DocuSign, which means that you can be at home now and do that signing. So I think I'm in a little bit of a unique position around staying close to the business, because I'm the only board director that's outside London, and I've got global and regional roles. So I've always spent a lot of time in meetings in real life, but also virtual meetings, because the bulk of the people that I manage are not in Hong Kong. They're not even in Asia. They're in the UK and the US. So I am used to doing that, and it's very important that I spend, well, it's vital. I mean, I can't do my job unless I'm talking to the leaders of all those groups regularly. And I'm not a big office snob, although I do have one in Hong Kong, but I gave up my office in Bracken House, our global headquarters in London, so that I could sit with my team. We were embracing agile working, and I thought, well, there's no point my team sitting on the first floor and me plonked down in an office on the fifth floor when I'm in London. So I just thought, well, I'll just go and sit with the team. They must hate it. But anyway, it does mean that I'm a lot more involved in the day-to-day business, and always, eavesdropping a little bit on the gossip, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
So, and the funny thing, the contradiction is that even though we have so many more ways of being in contact with each other, you have to work harder to have meaningful contact and thoughtful contact with other people, because it's so easy for the fast one-liner or a two-word off-the-cuff WhatsApp remark or whatever. So I think it takes more effort to have meaningful contact, and of course that's one of the things that I'm worried about, and a lot of people worry about, not just people at the FT, about the effects of remote working brought on by COVID. A lot of people do work a hybrid way of working anyway in lots of different industries, but some industries, probably including our own, I don't think we were ready and absolutely set up for the challenges in the workplace that COVID has brought to us around the world. So we spend a lot of time now as a company staying close, feeling the pulse of our staff, but we have quarterly surveys. The surveys change depending on circumstances. So at the moment, like a lot of other companies, we're worried about the emotional and mental well-being of our teams, because it's some people may not be seeing anybody other than people remotely or on the screen like we are now. So there's a lot more work that has to go on behind the scenes to make sure that we're staying in touch with our teams, not just about how they're going at work, but also how they're going themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, what do you think? But productivity, I think, has suffered. I think that generally we're not as productive if we don't have the opportunity to collaborate and convene with our colleagues. I don't think you have to do it every day, but I do think that there's something special about coming together and talking about a topic and throwing ideas around, honing it with an immediacy rather than like a time lag, or because I can't make that meeting, so I have to put my input in later. I think that we do miss out on something at work by not being able to be together at least some of the time.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And, we're lucky enough here in Singapore that, restrictions have been relaxed enough for us to at least go back to the office part of the week. So we've got kind of a hybrid arrangement where you do a couple of days in the week when you can do all your face-to-face meetings and your brainstorming and so on. Which I actually enjoy that kind of mix. So
yeah,
it's different for everyone, isn't it?
We have the same. We have Team A, Team B. So some teams are in on certain days of the week, and others are working from home. So, and I do think that that's going to persist. And I quite enjoy doing some work in my sweaty old gym gear, or in your gym jams. But as long as you've got that face-to-face, the opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you went first and mentioned COVID before I did. So
sorry.
You kind of opened Pandora's box now, because I've got an audience question come in now related to the pandemic, actually. So from Natalie Coe, who says, "Hi, Angela. Thanks for this talk. I'm really enjoying it. I would like to ask, you mentioned the FT is profitable. What is the percentage of subscriber versus advertising earnings and the future outlook for both revenue streams? Also, advertising revenue has been affected during this pandemic. What is the FT strategy for getting through this?"
Right. Okay.
Yeah, which is
great. Thanks very much, Natalie. Questions that it's a question that I think about every day. So the percentage of so content revenue versus advertising earnings, I'd say it's around 65% comes from content now, and the rest obviously from advertising. The future outlook, I think we would like to see that dependency on advertising diminish even more. Of course, we want to get every advertising dollar we can, but at the same time, we would like to see substantial growth in our subscriber base, because I think that kind of reliable, renewable, repeatable revenue is the kind of stuff you want, because it's less exposed to economic cycles, pandemics when they come out of the woodwork. So it is it's certainly a much more it's a much preferable place to be. The future outlook, well, we've seen tremendous subscriber growth this year, like many of our competitors. I think that COVID has not only increased our page views, but it's also driven subscriptions. We reached our 2020 target for global subscriptions, I think, around April, May. So there's certainly correlation between crisis and people being prepared to pay for quality content. Advertising revenue, yes, went down. It's gone down in print and gone up in online, more than we thought. But as we all know, if you're in the media business, $1 of print, if you lose it, just doesn't automatically transfer itself to $1 of online. I mean, print advertising is more valuable. So we've been working harder on other revenue streams like events, like business education, and I think that we've been pretty good at diversifying some of those revenue streams.
Yes, and I mean, it's not just Hong Kong that's where the FT's APAC HQ is that suffered from COVID, right? But yeah. I mean, Hong Kong has had one issue after another. So I wondered actually, how have the troubles in Hong Kong affected operations and business at the FT APAC, if at all? And are you at all worried about fewer press freedoms now that Hong Kong's independence from mainland China has in reality been kind of left hanging? How has it affected things, and how do you feel about it?
Well, it's so far so good. I think that the spectre of the national security law in Hong Kong is so far been worse than the actual effects of it. I think we need to cover it without fear and without favour, which is our motto, and constantly keep an eye on it. We have the editorial headquarters here. We've got bureaus in Shanghai and Beijing, and also in the south of China and Shenzhen. So we're watching what goes on, and we'll be reporting on what we see. But at the moment, I'm not going to second guess what I think is going to happen, because I'm just watching the same as everybody else. I think one of the important things from my point of view, and not as a news gatherer, is to make sure that the wheels of business are going to continue to run smoothly. So that will involve visas, making sure that our staff that we want to transfer here can get visas, that we can distribute our content without any kind of obstruction because of censorship. So what I'm looking at is whether or not I'm seeing some of that. And of course, I always am very conscious of any self-correction to make sure that we're coming at it with a pretty open-minded viewpoint, so that I'm not coming at it with an opinion that's already been formed. So yeah, I mean, of course we're concerned about it, because it's the unknown, and it came pretty much as a bolt from the blue. But we have to just report on it and be as objective as we possibly can.
Got it. Okay, well, let's move on to another topic, which is definitely COVID related. Again, is you're in charge globally of FT Live, which is events arm of the business, right? Yeah. Here we are doing a virtual event. Imagine that. So you know, how has your experience been in moving to virtual events with FT Live? Because, you know, I remember before COVID hit, you guys were doing so many events, right? And it seemed to be going really well as an arm of the business. How's it looking now, and how has the transition been to virtual, if you've engaged it?
Right. Well, you know, I think the word that comes immediately to mind is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. We literally moved overnight from being a 100% offline business to a 100% online business. And that was, you know, crazy and frightening, you know, but exciting, right? It was really new, and it was, yeah, really new. It's really new. So lots and lots and lots of mistakes were made. Lots of mistakes are still being made, trying to, you know, turn yourself into almost a television production company. You know, I was a television producer, and it strikes me that now trying to produce events, you need to be more of a TV producer than you do a content producer in a big 5-star luxury hotel. But, you know, hey, we pivoted. I hate the word pivot, but we pivoted really quickly. And one of the things we set ourselves to do within a 5-week framework, Orson Francesconi, who is the MD of FT Live, he and I got together, and with also one of our sister companies in Holland, the Next Web, and we thought, why don't we just do something really big? Everybody's at home. We thought we'd do something for May. Was it May or was it April? Anyway, called the Global Boardroom. So we thought we'll do something really big, get all these fabulous speakers trapped at home, and all these potential delegates also trapped at home, and just try and pull something together that's really substantial really quickly and see what happens. So in 5 weeks, we had 100 speakers, 22 hours of content, and 58,000 registered delegates. So we were completely shocked by that, and totally delighted by the extraordinary amount of data it provided us. Could you imagine how long it would take us to capture all that data under normal circumstances? You know, we normally have around 300 people at some of our events. Some of them have a lot more, some of them have a lot less, but, you know, the average number of people at our events would be around 350. So suddenly having 58,000 delegates, all of whom have had to register and give us some information, I mean, that was like a bonanza. So that of course was pretty addictive. We went, okay, we can either go for this like fast, head first, and make some mistakes on the way, or we can be just really, really cautious and you know, perhaps not take full advantage of what's been put out in front of us. So yeah, we're doing hundreds of events. I mean, literally hundreds of events in the space of 3.5 months that we would normally spend a whole year doing. And we're going to make a profit this year. So it's the FT Live business is going to be profitable. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to being 100% offline, even when we're able to do so. I think that what we're thinking about is a sliding scale now. So you're going to charge people a lot of money to convene in person somewhere glamorous and fabulous, with the opportunity to rub elbows, literally, because that's all we do these days, with important and influential people. And then you might be charging people less because they're joining us on screen, and even less if they don't want to be there live, but they want to get a report at the end of it. So there's a lot of slicing and dicing and experimenting that we're doing right now, and I'm really grateful to the team for embracing it so wholeheartedly. I think a lot of them are completely exhausted, but I don't think any of them are bored.
Well, I'm really glad to hear it's going well, and I'm even more pleased that you mentioned data, because that segues very nicely into my next question, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Which on data, which has become the #1 asset class for companies now.
Yeah.
reality. So, you know, I wanted to ask, how does the FT use its data actually? And more, you know, speaking more widely, bigger picture stuff, is privacy just something that we have to consider now as consigned to history, particularly with advanced AI, virtual personal assistants, and the 5G super cycle on the near horizon? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a big question. At the FT, you know, we're not, I just want to put that out there, we're not data driven, but we're data informed. So for example, we wouldn't edit the newspaper, website, etc. by page view. So if we see that there's 100,000 page views about the royal wedding, it wouldn't drive us to get more content, you know, produce more content about that. You know, we have there's a reason why we're quite expensive to subscribe to, and that's because you're also subscribing to the expert opinions and news editing of our journalists. So we wouldn't be driven by data on our journalism, but we're certainly informed by the data in journalism as well as in commercial. So it's you know, it's really granular for us, and it's on a day-to-day basis we're looking at it, and we pull it out for our sales conversations, and we pull it out for customer support, and there's a lot of collaboration between our analytics team and business stakeholders to try and deliver insights from the data, which can then help us with our sales pitches for advertising and also for, you know, B2B subscription acquisition. You know, it's all very useful stuff. Yeah. I think that the explosion of data has meant that we've shifted our North Star metric. So we look now a lot more at something called LTV, or lifetime value, which estimates how much money a customer will spend with the FT during their lifetime as a subscriber, not so much their lifetime, but their lifetime as a subscriber. And so it provides a way of measuring the long-term value we're creating for the business, rather than focusing on some short-term, you know, knee-jerk reactions. And as for privacy, I don't know about you, but I think it's getting harder and harder to maintain my own, let alone my customers. But you know, anyone with an understanding of online advertising, agencies, marketing executives, media executives know just how much of ourselves we're giving away daily. You know, just by clicking on a story, and there's cookies everywhere, and they're capturing your data, and they're going to know a lot more about you. I mean, I once clicked on an ad on Instagram for a running machine. And who knew that there were so many running machine companies in the world, because they are constantly serving me that sort of stuff. And I thought, just one little slip, and that's what you get served. So you know that they're out there, and what happens when they may be wrong about running machines, but they're not wrong about my interest in literary festivals. They're not wrong about my interest in quality leather shoes. so you know, there's a wonderful ID profile that we can that we're giving away every single day. You know, the GDPR, you know, General Data Protection Regulations in the EU, you know, puts a perimeter around what a lot of companies can do, and we're ultimately, you know, very respectful of that. But I can't help but feel, and maybe this means I'm an ultimate free marketeer, that to a certain extent, this is my personal opinion, that, you know, as individuals, we need to be guardians of our own information.
Yeah. No to the joys of profiling and retargeting.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the free market then, and liberalism. it's the FT's ideological stance, right? It's staunchly free market and liberal. But with COVID-19, we are definitely seeing regression back towards nationalism and populism right across the world, in almost every country.
Yeah.
In your view, is the very concept of globalization itself at threat now? And if so, what are the repercussions of that for the FT?
Well, I think globalism has taken successive knocks before COVID-19 struck us all. Most obviously with the rise of, populist nationalism in the UK's Brexit vote, and the US and the election of Donald Trump in 2016. His slogan was, make America great again, not welcome Mexico, right? So they're really obvious and measurable populist movements. So the question now is whether COVID will kill off populism. Maybe COVID, but at the end of it, it's going to define what kind of politics we want to have in our own backyards, and whether right-wing populism is going to continue to flourish. I mean, will Trump be re-elected next week? What's going to happen to Boris Johnson in the UK? You've got Bolsonaro in Brazil. I mean, I think that we're at a fantastic inflection point, to borrow Malcolm Gladwell's term, because we're teetering on the edge of it. I mean, we're all got a ringside seat, and that makes it fantastically exciting. So I wish we could have this conversation in 2 weeks' time, because I think that would be a really, which is when we're having the next global boardroom, by the way, because I think it's going to be a great time to pull people together. It's another convening factor, the result, whatever it is, of the US election. And how we're going to head into next what kind of economic trends we're going to see next year. Martin Wolf, who's our chief economics commentator, is one of the world's great proponents in the benefits of globalization. And he, of course, is, I think, still a believer in it when it works properly. But so far we can see that what's clearly happening is the US wants to roll back globalization, and China wants to shape it into something that suits it a lot more. And if you're going to be isolationist in Washington, it's giving Beijing an opportunity to step up on the world stage. So let's see what happens if someone like Joe Biden wins.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel very much like the US election result is just going to set the tone globally for the coming years, isn't it? So
yeah, it's never have people been watching it quite so closely, I think, around the world. I don't know do you know how many people have voted so far in the US? I think the last number I saw was 62 million, which strikes me as a lot, considering you've still got a week out from the election. But I think that whichever way people are voting, it's clear that this election has galvanized a lot of people to come out and vote.
Absolutely, yeah. It depends whether you believe the polls or you believe the people who are Trump supporters and say, no, everyone's voting for him. They just don't want to admit it when the pollsters call them up, right? But anyway, let's ask the audience what they think on this question. The poll question is globalization under threat from nationalism and populism? Yes, no, or not sure are the options. So please do get voting, and we'll give you around 30 seconds to cast your vote there. Wow, it's overwhelming at the moment. If you haven't voted, please do.
Yeah.
Just a few more seconds. Okay, I think we'll call it there. So again, for those watching on catch up, the question again was, is globalization under threat from nationalism and populism? 100% of people voted yes. Mm. So there we go. That's a good barometer of the kind of sentiment out there. Very interesting indeed. Okay. So I mean, you mentioned China just a few seconds ago, and I know the FT's kind of launched a business over there. FT Chinese is kind of a bit different from your FT model in Hong Kong and other parts of the world, which is subscription based. I think it's is it a freemium model?
Well, actually, we introduced a subscription base, a subscription about 18 months ago, and that plus COVID and the effect it's had on some advertising means that content is now our biggest earner in China. So that's great news, and particularly on apps. On our Android and iOS apps, because we don't have unrestricted access to our potential readers in China. There's quite a lot of difficulty getting through that Great Wall of China, but that's why I think the great thing about the mainland Chinese audience, and Hong Kong as well for that matter, they are fantastically adept with their mobile devices. So if you can serve them a very good product on their mobile, then you're going to get a lot of pickup. So we have over 35,000 subscribers now, which is tiny in China, but it's pretty good from a very low base. And so that's where we're focusing now in China.
Interesting. And are there any other plans for new ventures on the horizon for the FT?
For the FT, there's always new ventures on the horizon. We are looking. We started a new business only last year. Gosh, it seemed a long time ago. Which is a business called FT Strategies, which is a company that assists. It's like a consultancy. In fact, it's run by somebody who used to be a partner at McKinsey. It's 100% owned and started by us. It was something that came out of our data analytics work. And we are basically a gun for hire. So we're helping lots of companies in a subscription economy try and develop a business model that's going to be most appropriate for them. So that business has gone from nothing to about 14 people, all based in London, and with some increasingly global footprint. So that's a business that we're going to invest in over the next couple of years, because frankly we've got our loads of data that we can mine to help people who want to try and make the subscription economy work for them, not just media, retail, all sorts of sectors. Yeah. We also bought a controlling stake in the Next Web I mentioned earlier, which is an information and events business based in Amsterdam. It also has it's got a kind of bit of a startup ecosphere there. They have space that they rent out to startups, and that's pretty interesting, because by having those people in under your roof, you get to spend more time in that ecosphere, which means that you've got more information that you can then pump out. So that's also been a really interesting acquisition for us. Business education, we're doing a lot more around which is also in my portfolio. We're doing a lot more around board membership, executive education, and of course, online is perfect for that. It's much more expensive and cumbersome to have face-to-face learning, but to do these courses virtually, the combination of live interaction with teachers, lecturers, and then also to continue to do your work at your own pace online, that is just perfect for us. So we're obviously going to be spending some time investing in those lines of business.
Yeah, and it's a growing sector, and lots of money going into that sector.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, just another message out there in the audience. Time is running out. The clock is ticking. You've got 20 minutes or so. So get your questions in for Angela if you want to take advantage of this opportunity. And I'm going to take the opportunity now to ask you actually about the goals C-suite for a second, Angela. We want to help managers become better leaders, to help leaders become managers, and to help progressive professionals further their careers. And we believe that to enable that, as well as encouraging leadership training and continued learning and development, we're also pushing hard on the merits of mentoring, right? So I just wondered, do you mentor anyone yourself? And I think you said earlier you'd never been mentored. You had sponsors. Yeah. So yeah, just wondering, are you involved in that world much?
I mentor somebody inside the FT. She's a senior, relatively senior manager, and she manages a team of about 30 people. And so I work with her just to talk about her management style, you know, where she feels she's letting herself down. She's very, very hard on herself, and so I spend quite a lot of time saying, just relax, you know. Rome wasn't built in a day. But I'm finding that really interesting, and it is like a reverse mentoring thing, because if you're having a good conversation, you're learning a lot more from them, or you're learning just as much from them as they might be from you. And I've also done some mentoring outside the FT. One young graduate who started a big insurance company, she reached out to me on LinkedIn and said that she would love to have the opportunity to do some mentoring with me for a few months. And I really admired her gumption, and she had a great story to tell. She was the only female graduate was going into sales for this big insurance company. And I thought, yeah, I'd like to talk to her about that, because I was quite shocked, frankly, that a big insurance company, a well-known name like that, didn't have any young women in their sales team for the south of England. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So yeah, I think that mentoring is, well, I'm a sticky beak, you know, once a journalist, always a journalist. I'm always interested to hear other people's stories and to quiz them about them. But and if you can dress that up as mentoring, yeah, count me in. I think it's fabulous.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so much fun to hear the stories of others. Hence why tonight is so much fun, right? Good to hear. So everyone knows the fake it until you make it line, right? And, you've said previously that leaders must actually be good actors so that their confidence infects others and quells anxiety in the ranks. So what's your own personal technique for getting into that mindset whereby you must display that infectious optimism even when things are going down the toilet, right? It's not easy things to do. What's the trick of the trade there?
Well, you know, I have to confess that I'm just an optimist by nature. It really annoys my husband. It really annoys my husband. He sometimes says, I can't believe you just thought that you found the good in this particularly terrible situation. He said, I really find that annoying.
It's more unusual for a journalist, I have to say.
I know. Well, I always think that there's a story just over the horizon. So just the same way now, I mean, commercial, I always think there's a pot of money over the horizon, you know, just over the hill. That's just who I am. So I don't really need to work at that. I come to it with that kind of optimistic mindset. And I try not to filter myself too much. You know, my teams kind of know when I'm happy or sad. I'm not often very sad. I get annoyed every now and then, but I never lose my rag, I hope to think. I'm quite comfortable being myself, even though it might cause some discomfort to people around me. But I hate that term, bring your authentic self to work. But I think the nugget behind that is the truth. I mean, I don't think I think you do have to tell people the truth. You do have to combine it with some acting. You do have to be able to tell stories. And I think, and what is acting really? It's telling a story in a compelling way. So I think that there's that little bit of acting that needs to go into most of your management scenarios. But in this crisis, I think that, it's a cycle. Life is just, Walt Disney wasn't wrong. It's a circle of life. There's a cycle. Life is made up of loads of cycles. We will come through this COVID cycle. I don't know in what state we're going to be, but we'll certainly get to the end of it at some stage. So I think that people need to try and think over that horizon as much as possible, because if you're going to get bogged down in the terrible negativity and drudgery of like, oh my God, am I going to have my job in 3 months' time? I think it just adds to that terrible stress, pressure, and an emotional exhaustion that I think everybody's feeling at the moment.
Got it. Okay, well, we'll go to our final poll question of the night. Not long left now, guys. So as I said, do get your questions in for Angela if you have any. Now we'll move to the poll question, which is, do leaders need to be good actors? The options are yes, no, not sure. So if we can pop that one up on the screen, and please do get voting.
100%.
Come on, there's got to be some dissenters out there.
Oh no, I'm with them.
Okay.
Oh no, here we go, dissent.
12 seconds, yeah. Another 10, 15 seconds.
Ooh, it's a draw.
Interesting. So yeah, maybe 5 more seconds and then we can wrap up. Oh. Okay, let's call it there. So an even split. Do leaders need to be good actors? 50% say yes, 50% say no, 0 say not sure. I'd really like to hear what the people saying no have to say. Jump in the chat box and tell us why you voted no. Yeah. Okay, all right, let's talk industry heroes for a second. If we
right, okay.
So who would you say, can be anyone at, an MNC, an SME, or even a startup, who do you admire out there or have admired in the past, who's done great things, is a great leader, a great manager, and sets a great example for their company, their team, and so on? Is there anyone that kind of has been a guiding light for you along the way?
I've been impressed by lots of people that I've met and interviewed in the past. I don't think I realized how interesting this man was when I did interview him a few years ago. I interviewed him on stage for one of our events, and that's Masahiko Iwatani. And he's the president and I think group CEO of Shiseido, the cosmetics and body care company. And he is the first, it's obviously based in Japan, he's the first, I think, president from outside the company in its 150, 140-year history. And he's a really interesting guy because he, in the interview, it came out that he said, my idea of how you should manage and have the kind of people you surround you happened when I worked for, I'm having a mental block whether it was Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but anyway, I think it was Coke. And he had a female boss. And he said, hang on, this is really interesting. I've got a female boss and she's doing a great job. We're hitting great numbers. And this is like diversity in action. It was the first time he'd ever really thought about it. And so when he came there, he overhauled the board, overhauled management, brought in foreign talent. Instead of, closed shop Japan, he brought in managers from around the world. I remember one time I met at an event a couple of people who did work for him, and one lady was a German who was in charge of the hair care division. and she'd been brought in the previous year. Another one was a Russian who'd come in, and she was working in the comms team. So he had this extraordinary spread of people around him, and also decided that he was considering it was a company that was pitching its product almost exclusively to women. He said, and there were no women on the board, so he's got 50% of the board is now women. So it seems really sensible stuff, but not a lot of people feel, just get it and get on and do it. So he's someone that's really impressed me with his ability to make change happen and stick, and to show great benefits. And just as an aside, I heard the other day that he's actually the chairman of Japan's 30% club. So an appropriate appointment for him, which made me think of him again, right? And of course, you mentioned, I think, Pearson before, and Dame Marjorie Scardino has always been someone I've been admired and been intrigued by, actually. She's still the longest serving CEO, let alone female CEO, of the last 20 years of a FTSE 100 company. And she was particularly impressive to work the room. I mean, she's incredibly empathetic, really genuine. And when she was talking to you, you would have her attention. And it might have only been for a minute, like 10 seconds, but you had her attention. And after she moved on, you felt that, hey, that was a nice encounter. And she was a very natural speaker, and she inspired trust. And I thought that I was always very impressed by her, and her ability to coalesce people behind her and her vision for Pearson.
Yeah, and that really is a great trait of a leader, isn't it? Making you feel, or the person they are talking to, feel like they are the only person in the world, that there are no other distractions. They've got their full attention.
Yeah. When I was a journalist, I met Bill Clinton a couple of times. The first time was in a lineup at an APEC meeting in Bandar Seri Begawan in Brunei, and he shakes your hand. Hi, how are you? Great to meet you. What do you think of this? It was a 15-second encounter, and I thought, that was nice. That was good. That was great. I felt there was eye contact. There was attention. Anyway, after he stopped, years after, he was no longer president, and on the speaking circuit, he came to the CLSA, the investment bank and broker was famous for their annual client jamborees, where they'd bring in amazing speakers and entertainers, everyone from Tom Jones to, I think they had Elton John at one stage. So, and one of their keynote speakers one year was Bill Clinton. And I was attending the event, and he was going around and talking to people. And I kid you not, Dean, he came up and he said, hello, how are you? I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but I remember that we met in Brunei. What's that? I mean, that is a superhuman memory. Yeah. And I thought to myself, well, that's you may have lots of flaws, we all do, but I thought, hey, that's you're amazing communicator. Yeah. That was, and here I am. I'm telling you that story 10 years later. I mean, it was impressive.
How things have changed. Look who we have for US president. Okay. All right. So we're nearly out of time now. So finally, just to end, as someone who's made it to the C-suite and has actually stayed there for many years, what would your advice be to both the aspirants who want to grow into candidates for the senior roles, and for those incumbents already there who want to keep evolving and keep bettering themselves? What would be the fundamental? Right. Sure. Yeah.
I think that if you want to be a senior leader, you've got to figure out who you are and what kind of a leader you want to be. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but then you have to strive to be the best version of yourself. If you think that, well, I'm a very detail-oriented person, but I want to be a leader, you've got to kind of adapt yourself to make sure that you can lead with a good view of your landscape without getting too bogged down underneath. So I mean, you've got to adjust your goals to your strengths and your weaknesses. So I sometimes think that a good thing to do, and I would have loved to have had it earlier, would be to have some coaching. I think a coach, a bit like a mentor, is someone that's going to tease out lots of interesting things about you. And as we all know, it's so nice to have someone just sit there and listen to you. How lovely is that? It's a great, I should say, such a terrible thing to admit, but it's a great luxury. And it's never too late. Maybe I'll go and get myself one. And if you're already a senior leader, you've just got to keep learning. I mean, everything is changing so quickly, and technology, of course, being at the heart of all that. So you've just got to constantly be reading and talking and meet to lots of different people, and also, diversity of thought, of course, is incredibly important. And if you want to stay current, you've got to be able to resonate with younger people. And you certainly don't want to think that behave like some sort of groover, because they'll see through that in a minute. But again, listening and giving people quality attention is something that I think good leaders and people who are aspiring to leadership should cultivate. And something as basic as studying. I'm doing with a bunch of people in my teams. We've just started a digital transformation module at Columbia University's business school, in the EMBA program, and we're doing it because we want to learn as much as we can about best practice in outside our own industry, not just inside it, and how to help drive transformation. So I think, and having a few of us do that course, not only are we doing it virtually with lots of people from around the world. I think there's 40 different countries and 200 people. It gives us an opportunity to go away and do some brainstorming ourselves with the stuff that we've learned on that course. Yeah. So it's a combination of things, and at the heart of it is a lot of hard work, really. I wish I could say there's an easy way to do anything.
You can crowdsource the homework, can't you? If you
we could. Noel, I've got to be careful. They're very strict about plagiarism and copying, so we have to do all our work independently. But all the conversations ahead of it is something that we can do together.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that someone has jumped on the chat thread there to explain why they voted no. So we won't name the person in case they don't want to be named, but for those watching on catch up, for the question about whether leaders should be actors or not, we have a response from someone saying self-belief, yes, but being authentic and human beats acting. A leader's followers will see through it.
Yeah.
I think it's very nuanced, isn't it? It's a very nuanced conversation, and I probably shaped the question in the wrong way, but yeah.
No. I think the commentator, the chatter, is absolutely right. I mean, you've got to be. If you can't, there is a combination of attributes that you need to bring to that, and I think being a good presenter of yourself is almost the similar kind of attributes that a good actor might have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we're sadly out of runway. A big thank you to Angela for giving.
Thank you very much, Dean. I really found it a fascinating conversation, and thank you for the invitation.
No, pleasure. We really appreciate it, and you've given us so much of your valuable time tonight. So that's brilliant. It's been an absolute treat for me, and I'm sure for all those who've tuned in as well to watch live, and all those who will watch on catch up. Sadly, the number of people watching on catch up normally vastly outnumbers those watching live, which is a shame, because they don't get to contribute to the polls or the questions, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So, for the audience, we will be announcing next month's Mixer guest in the coming days. So to be in the loop on that one, just go to our website, csuite.sg, C-suite with a hyphen, for updates, and do follow us on social media. Also, please feel free to drop me an email at dean@csuite.sg. If you have any feedback or you'd like to suggest future guests for the Leadership Mixer series, that would be great. I'd be delighted to hear your thoughts. For now, though, all that's left to do is to thank our esteemed guest one last time. Virtual applause.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you indeed, Angela, and that's it. So I'll say goodbye. So more from us soon. Bye for now, everyone, and
thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.